Hello and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch, your host, and we're back to have another conversation, this time about a pretty grim topic, but it's an important one. We're pleased to welcome back Rick Wayman. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, a nonprofit dedicated to building awareness and support for carbon dioxide removal technology. Carbon dioxide removal, by the way, is usually referred to as CDR, and we will do so throughout the conversation. We're going to check in on progress on CDR, but the topic today is the new and unfortunately repeated twin threat of climate change and nuclear war. Vladimir Putin's reckless war on Ukraine, which has come with repeated threats to use nuclear weapons, came at a critical juncture in the response to climate change. The 2020s is the make or break decade for halting emissions growth and starting on a path toward zero emissions and ultimately removing the excess carbon that we have put in the atmosphere. And this year is considered critical to a collective global response to the climate crisis. But at the same time, the Ukraine war has many nations scrambling for access to fossil fuels to replace what they used to buy from Russia. It could not have come at a worse time. Before he joined the Foundation for Climate Restoration, Rick led the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, a nonprofit that has waged peace against nuclear threats since 1982. The anti-nuclear movement has been less prominent in public debate since the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union and its Eastern Bloc dissolved in 1989. And that makes Putin's dangerous threats to use nukes in Ukraine even more startling and concerning. So what can we do now? The lessons of the past combined with insights developed by climate activists may hold the key to unlocking a more peaceful and sustainable world. You can learn more about the Foundation for Climate Restoration at www.foundationforclimaterestoration.org. Foundationforclimaterestoration.org has no spaces, no dashes. It's easy to type in, but it's long. Welcome back to the show, Rick. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mitch. It's great to be back.
Well, it's always good to talk to you all because you're doing such important work. But let's talk about the fact that for the last 30 years, we've been able to breathe a lot easier because the nuclear button had seemed to be pretty irrelevant. What is Vladimir Putin thinking by threatening to use nuclear weapons? And can you remind us of what would happen if, in fact, that were to come to pass?
Well, that's a great question, Mitch. And the answer to that is really grim. But the reality is we just don't know how the leaders of the 9 nuclear-armed nations would behave when faced with a nuclear attack. So if Putin does choose to use a nuclear weapon, we don't know how President Biden would react, how any of the leaders of the other nuclear-armed countries would react, because it's really never happened before. The history that we have to go on is based on when the US actually used nuclear weapons against the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Those were small and rudimentary nuclear weapons by today's standards. And even then, tens of thousands of people were killed instantly with truly unspeakable suffering experienced by survivors. So now the US and Russia both possess thousands of nuclear weapons. They can be delivered by missile, submarine, and aircraft. So life as we know it could be turned upside down in an afternoon. And that is really concerning to me and should be concerning to all of us. It's unfortunately a real threat at this point in time.
In all your years working in the anti-nuclear movement, did you ever really come to terms or understand what these people are thinking? I had a conversation with Senator Henry Jackson, Scoop Jackson, at the Democratic Convention back, I think it was in 1984. And I asked him why on earth he thought it was a good idea to use nuclear weapons. And he said to me, son, if we decide that you need to die in a war, it's going to happen. And I said to him, I will never vote for you. But I don't understand that thinking.
No, I mean,
how is this even reasonable?
Well, in my opinion, in my experience, it's something that is really divorced from human reality.
Mm-hmm.
It's a military computation. You know, it's sort of an equation on paper. How many millions of Americans could we conceivably sacrifice in a war to make it still worth it? I mean, that kind of mentality is really beyond my ability to comprehend. But I think that in a way, that's why we were so successful in the past few years at the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons in shifting the narrative. So we were able at the United Nations to shift the narrative from that sort of purely military utilitarian mindset into a humanitarian mindset, right? What do these weapons actually do to humans? So we partnered with and members of our campaign were survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, survivors of testing in the Marshall Islands, in indigenous areas of Australia, etc. So that was really key to understanding what nuclear weapons actually do. Right? It's not just pieces on a chessboard. This is real, and it really affects our fellow human beings and ultimately all of us.
So if they were to use, for instance, a tactical nuclear weapon, a small yield nuclear weapon somewhere in Ukraine, the radiation from that spreads all over the world. How dangerous would just one nuclear blast be? Because that may be the argument we hear. Well, that was a reasonable use.
Sure. Well, I don't want to downplay that by any means, because it would absolutely be catastrophic for the people in obviously the immediate area, and I don't know. I mean, I suppose it depends on the weather that day, the prevailing winds, etc. In terms of how far the radiation spreads. I don't want to downplay that at all, but the biggest concern that I would have if one nuclear weapon were used, no matter how big or small, is that ultimately that risks escalation. And again, we've yet to be in a situation where a nuclear weapon has been used in this new world where multiple countries possess them. The only time they've ever been used in warfare was when the US was the only country that possessed them. So we just don't know. Humans are wildly unpredictable. And that risk of escalation is just really too much to bear. And I can't imagine that any leader would take that risk.
Nor can I. It is genuinely insane. But unfortunately, we are confronted with this reality. I mean, the other day on a Russian news program, they threatened to blow up the UK and Ireland in response to some of the things that Boris Johnson has said about Russia. How do you think President Biden, German Chancellor Scholz, Johnson, and particularly China's Xi Jinping are reacting to this? Are we getting closer to a conflict, or are we dancing a pretty fine line that we are successfully going to avoid a nuclear detonation?
Well, we're indeed treading a thin line. And what I try to do here is think about it in reverse. So if the United States were involved in a war that it considered righteous and necessary, so maybe think back about 20 years to what the US was up to at that time, involved in a war that they proclaimed was righteous and necessary against Iraq. And numerous countries were supplying the adversary with billions of dollars in cash and weapons. How would the US government react? Would we see that as aggressive interference? Probably. And I'm not saying here that the US or UK or Germany or others shouldn't be assisting Ukraine. What I am saying is how Vladimir Putin views that assistance is another thing entirely. And it definitely risks a wider escalation of this conflict. I don't know what the solution is here, because the fact is, we to stand by while a country is invaded and overrun is also unacceptable. So there's no easy answer here. But yeah, I am concerned about how Western countries' actions are being perceived within Russia, and how those could be reacted to.
So we have talked in the past about climate anxiety, with this sort of sense that you're stuck with the bad situation that we're headed into with climate change. Now we've got this double whammy, and coming at it from your many years of activism in the anti-nuclear movement, how should each of us start to respond to this? What can we do to begin to exercise our influence to whatever extent we can?
That's a great question, Mitch. So the first thing I would say there is fear and anxiety are natural reactions to what we're faced with in the world right now. So it's totally normal to be feeling that way. In fact, it would probably be abnormal to not be feeling that way.
Yeah.
The key is what you do with that, right? One reaction that people have is apathy or denial, or just ignoring the situation altogether. What I see as the positive way is to channel that and not to lose hope. So to me, action is essential. And the good news is on both of these issues, on nuclear weapons and climate change, there are actually solutions out there to these very, very big problems. So I mentioned before that in years past, I had the privilege of doing a lot of work with the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, which it goes by the acronym ICAN. So about 5 years ago, we achieved a new treaty at the UN called the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. ICAN received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 for that achievement. And increasing adoption of this new treaty in countries around the world is really changing the equation on nuclear weapons. So I would encourage listeners to go to icanw.org, ICANW.org, to learn more about that treaty, to see how you can get involved, whether you're in the United States or in another country. There are ample opportunities to take that very scary issue and turn it into a positive, and get out there and act.
So can you share a couple of examples of the kind of action we could take? Because I think most people think, well, let's just get into the streets and demand change. But there are more targeted ways to act, aren't there?
Well, definitely. I mean, getting out and making your opinion known in the streets is certainly important. Sure. But, just one example that comes to mind immediately, every single day in every newspaper, there are multiple stories about what's happening in Ukraine. You'll often find a story about the nuclear threat associated with that conflict. Mm-hmm. So a key thing to do, excuse me, is to write a letter to the editor.
Okay.
And obviously there are a number of ways you can take it, but my recommendation is to talk about what is out there as a solution, and that is for countries to abide by and respect the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is emerging as a new international norm. It's now considered international law. So that's a positive action that people can take to educate readers of a newspaper. Still, whether it's online or in a print edition, letters to the editor are widely read. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most popular parts of a newspaper. And honestly, it's not difficult to do it. Put 200 words down of your key message and just click send. See what happens. What's the worst that could happen there? So I encourage people to. That's a great way to make your voice heard.
Are there any particular forums online that you would recommend people visit and participate in?
No, I would recommend whatever your preferred.
Out here in the real world. So would you reckon? So act out here in the real world rather than go online and complain.
Sure. Well, so one thing that's happening all over the United States and all over the world is municipalities. So city councils are passing resolutions that, this city supports the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And that's a great way, again, to raise awareness, but also to point out that many of the cities in the United States are actually targets of nuclear weapons. So that is a great opportunity to get out. You're educating your local elected officials. Your local media is picking that up. Your fellow community members are listening. So that is a great way out in the real world to take an action that can make a difference.
And you can stack it up. Letter to the editor, go to the city council meeting, write a letter to the city council, write a letter to the mayor, write a letter to the governor. There are a lot of things that you can do so you're not simply stuck at home worrying about whether or not the planet's going to cook from nuclear weapons or from climate change.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, ultimately, Mitch, that goes back to taking action. And we are mere individuals on a planet with about 8 billion people, right? So it's easy to think, oh, I'm just one person. It's not going to make a difference whether I do it or not, but it actually does. No change happens without dedicated individuals starting it, getting the ball rolling.
I think this is a great place to take a short break. We're going to be right back with Rick Wayman. Welcome back. We're talking with Rick Wayman. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration about the unexpected and tragic return of nuclear war as a real possibility. I found in the 1980s that marching and collecting signatures was a balm. It was good for me to take action against nuclear weapons at the time. Do you see a new hybrid movement emerging out of this dual threat, both nuclear and climate change? And what is your thoughts about what that might look like as a veteran of both movements?
Wow. Well, both of these issues, nuclear weapons and climate change, are so vast and really quite frightening. It's a little bit hard to imagine a hybrid movement coming together, but ultimately, anyone who cares about the future of humanity needs to be paying attention to and acting on both. So I think the key, again, is with both issues, focusing on solutions. And in that sense, these are two issues that humans caused, right? Mm-hmm. Humans invented nuclear weapons and continue to create them and make them more powerful, et cetera. Humans have burned fossil fuels for many, many decades now, and have put 1 trillion plus tons of excess carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is leading to this climate chaos. So we've got to remember that humans caused those things which are threatening our existence, whether it's going to destroy us in an afternoon or over the course of years. Humans caused it. Humans can solve it. Keeping our focus on the positive side, on the fact that there are solutions, on the fact that we are capable of solving these problems, that'll give us things to say yes to and goals to chip away at. I think it's really important in any social movement not to just say, no, this is wrong, you're wrong. It's very important to produce the solution that you're looking for and have something to promote and have something to say yes to.
So a pro-human, pro-nature movement might be something that could start to draw people together, because I think one of the problems we have is not only a lack of a center in our political debate right now, but there's an over-reliance on the strongman, which we see in the rising anti-democratic movement and all the authoritarianism that's starting to take over globally. If we begin to talk as citizens, we could short circuit that.
Yeah, I think so. And ultimately, we've got to remember our common humanity. There's so much history of dehumanization of the other and of separating people, mentally and physically. It's really key to remember our common humanity. We're all, it's cliche, right? But we are all in this together. We share this earth, and all of our responsibility to, no matter who did what in the past, we've all got to now move forward together and make sure that we keep civilization around.
Well, it means looking beyond our differences. Let me turn to what you're doing with the Foundation for Climate Restoration. There's been a lot of progress in the discussion about our response to climate change. And one of the things that the UN's recent report clearly put back on the table is the need to remove anthropogenic carbon from the atmosphere. What's going on with carbon dioxide removal with CDR? What kind of progress are you seeing?
Well, so first, to just expand on that a little bit, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, released a series of reports over the past few months. And what they made clear is no matter what happens with getting to net zero, no matter how quickly we get to net zero, if we're going to keep warming to 1.5 degrees, we're going to have to remove a lot of excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're calling for at the Foundation for Climate Restoration is the same as what the IPCC is calling for, except we are not satisfied with net zero emissions. We're not satisfied with 1.5 degrees of warming. We're calling for the removal of 1 trillion tons of legacy carbon dioxide, which has been emitted by human activities since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So our goal is to get back under 300 parts per million in the atmosphere by 2050, which is the level at which human civilization developed and thrived. So more and more now, thanks to the IPCC putting this on the agenda very publicly and very clearly,
Mm-hmm.
I am hearing a lot more about carbon dioxide removal techniques that are being rolled out. We're seeing innovative companies that are improving their processes to implement climate restoration or CDR solutions that are scalable, financeable, durable, and equitable. And Mitch, one thing I wanted to mention for listeners who are interested in learning more about carbon dioxide removal solutions,
Mm-hmm.
we recently launched our solutions series where we're looking in depth at one carbon dioxide removal solution each month for 9 months. So you can learn more and sign up to find out when new content drops at F4CR.org. That's the short version, so you don't have to type
The
in
long version I gave
all
earlier.
of Foundation for Climate Restoration, F, and then the number 4CR.org.
Well, it's encouraging to hear that people are awakening to the need not only to reduce carbon emissions, but to remove it. And Peter Fikowski, who's the founder of F4CR, just released a new book on climate restoration. Talk a little more about what restoration looks like. Not only do we need to extract that CO2, we need to do other things like restore forests and so forth. What's the mix look like, in your opinion, now?
Well, we don't know exactly what the mix looks like just yet.
How can
but we're really excited about the fact that this decade that we're in, the 2020s, is our opportunity to do more research and development on that, to pilot various carbon dioxide removal techniques, to figure out ways to make hugely polluting industries like the concrete industry into a net positive for the climate, right? There are ways to now pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, turn that into synthetic limestone, which is a main ingredient of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things out there that are being developed that are really exciting and really do have the potential to not just make a difference, but make the difference.
Now, this raises an interesting question. It's one that I think is exacerbated by the nuclear discussion that we're also having, which is people are being told that technology can solve our problems, but technology is also what got us into the problem. How do you respond to folks who say, you know, what the right way to go is to simplify our way of life in such a way that we drastically reduce our reliance on technology? Is that a viable way forward, given how much CO2 is already in the atmosphere?
Well, what we're seeing right now in terms of climate restoration solutions is some are technological, right? There's direct air capture, which are essentially gigantic fans that suck air in, pull the carbon out, put the oxygen back out in the atmosphere, and then sequester that carbon.
Mm-hmm.
That's a technological innovation that has some potential. But a lot of climate restoration solutions are basically accelerated natural processes.
Okay.
And really, that's largely where we're going to have to go, especially in countries around the world that don't have a lot of financial resources to build large direct air capture facilities or something like that. Kelp is a fantastic carbon sequestration method that can be applied in many coastal in many countries that have a ocean as part of their territory,
and be a source of food potential too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the co-benefits there are really remarkable. And when we're looking at any climate restoration solution, we're looking at what the co-benefits are. We're looking at can this solution be applied equitably? Can making sure that particularly no community will be harmed by it. Yeah, so we're looking at the full picture of what that is, but we're confident that a number of solutions will be emerging here in the next few years. And so one thing I wanted to highlight is the X Prize for carbon removal is currently underway. Just a couple weeks ago, they announced 15 very promising solutions among the many hundreds that have entered the competition so far. Each of those 15 were awarded a $1 million kind of interim prize to encourage them to keep on going. But that X Prize was funded by the Elon Musk Foundation at $100 million. So that is driving a lot of innovation. So the private sector right now is driving a lot of innovation. We're doing a lot of work at the Foundation for Climate Restoration to get governments on board for them to help drive innovation as well, primarily through the power of the purse, right? Through procurement. And then just one other private sector effort to mention is just the other day, there was pretty big news about a group of quite forward-looking companies, many of them tech companies. So Stripe, Meta, Google, Shopify, they came together and have collectively put up roughly $1 billion to move carbon dioxide removal techniques forward. And these are not charities. These are companies that are responsible to their shareholders for a bottom line. And they're putting up that kind of money. That's a really good signal to me that there really is something to carbon dioxide removal, and the future is really there.
Well, it also suggests that companies are really awake to the fact that there is immense potential financial loss involved in not doing more. Do you see them coming to the foundation, for instance, and asking about what else they could do to reduce the risk associated with climate change for their business?
Yeah. The risk is a huge thing, and it's it's a bit tangible until it's not, right? Until some kind of massive catastrophe or disruption happens, and then that loss is real. So yeah, the forward-looking companies are trying to preempt that and trying to be responsible and take proactive steps to really make a difference. So yeah, we talk with a lot of different companies of all different sizes about what they can do, about how they can get involved in very deep, meaningful methods of carbon dioxide removal that aren't, not to knock planting trees, that's very important. But there are other methods out there that are more durable. They'll sequester the carbon for longer, and still have a lot of co-benefits for communities around the world. So yeah, we're working with companies and really highlighting the equity piece, making sure that any CDR efforts that they're involved in
Mhm.
are being deployed and applied equitably.
One of the things that Peter has been talking about recently in several of the mailing lists I follow is ocean iron fertilization, which has been tested a couple of times, once very controversially. Where are we on ideas like using iron in the ocean to encourage phytoplankton development, which sequesters carbon in their bodies and sinks to the bottom of the ocean?
Well, just a few months ago, the National Academies of Science issued a really substantial report on ocean-based carbon dioxide removal.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they highlighted in there is this ocean iron fertilization. And what they concluded is there just hasn't been enough research yet, but it's a potentially promising solution. And so they are encouraging more research to be done on it. It is indeed a promising solution. I would say, it does require more research. But for those who are interested in that, in Peter Fikowski's new book, the title is Climate Restoration, the Only Future That Will Sustain the Human Race. So in that book, he has a substantial section on ocean iron fertilization, how it works, and what the potential benefits are. And that book is written in very easy to access language.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a PhD in something or other to understand what he's talking about. So I highly recommend that as an easily accessible way to wrap your head around exactly what that means and various other restoration solutions that he highlights.
So how can folks get involved with the Foundation for Climate Restoration? And in particular, are you continuing the youth outreach that we've talked with you about before?
Yeah, we are. So we've got a very dynamic youth leaders program where we train young people aged 13 to 24 all around the world on how to, well, first of all, on what climate restoration is, but how to speak convincingly and meaningfully about it. And we open up many different opportunities for them to get involved, both in local campaigns wherever they live in the world, but also on larger stages. So, we try to make connections at high levels, give them the opportunity to, become young diplomats and young advocates on the UN level. That's really exciting for them. But anyway, that's a free program for anyone around the world, age 13 to 24. And then for people of all ages, we have a local chapter program. And again, that's worldwide. But that's just communities of people coming together and advocating for climate restoration policy and doing some of the things I talked about earlier, writing letters to the editor and op-eds, holding local awareness raising events. That's talking to their friends about it.
You're really hitting the point. I think that it's the most important here, which is we don't need to get frozen by this new dual threat. We need to just continue the action that we are all dedicated to, which is saving the planet from everything.
Yeah, definitely. And this stuff actually works, which is so exciting, right? Advocacy does work. And we're seeing that. I talked a lot about the nuclear weapons advocacy work that is moving forward. And we're seeing this already with our climate restoration advocates in local chapters around the world. They're making real progress. They're getting bills introduced on the state level here in the United States. There is a federal bill called the Carbon Dioxide Removal Leadership Act that was introduced in the House of Representatives a couple of weeks ago. And then countries around the world are really taking action, both in European countries like Ireland, Kenya is very dedicated to this, Colombia, and many others. So it's really exciting how this is coming together. And it's all driven by grassroots efforts and by individuals who are highlighting what's possible and really pushing the elected officials to make the right decisions and do the right thing.
Well, look, it's great to hear that our individual action is going to make a difference, and we'll be encouraging everybody to check out the foundation website. Rick, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Mitch. Anytime. And thank you so much for the invitation.
We've been speaking with Rick Wayman. He's the CEO of the Foundation for Climate Restoration, a nonprofit dedicated to building awareness and support for carbon dioxide removal technology and other forms of action. Folks, take a few minutes to check out F4CR.org, F4, the number, CR.org, or foundationforclimaterestoration.org. You can go either way. They do a lot of really interesting work. And as Rick mentioned, they're doing a lot of educational programs now, and I think you're going to find it beneficial. There's so much we can do to change our local world and have a global reach and impact everyone's lives for the better. Take a few minutes, write a letter to the editor, write a letter to your city council or to your mayor asking them to take a stand against the use of nuclear weapons, as well as to embrace a sustainability strategy if they have not already done so. And if they have done that, go take a look at your city's sustainability plan and see what you can do to get involved. We can all make a difference, and we can change this world for the better. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. I hope you'll share this podcast as well as many of the others that we've done to get more ideas out there so we create less waste, we create a world that we can all live and hand off to our grandchildren with real pride. We're going to be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.